Good evening and welcome. Sister Janet May, Michelle Waters, Nancy Knipper, and I. Welcome. Sister Janet May, Nancy Knipper, Michelle Waters, and I, who attended the Franciscan Federation Conference, and Sister Michelle Balick, who fully intended to go but was not able to, welcome you to this session this evening. The theme of this year's Franciscan Federation Conference was Hearts on Fire, Journeying Together. The song gave a lot of spirit to the Federation Conference, and the five of us will sing it first, and then we're going to invite you to join in. Hearts on fire, journeying together on the way. 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 This year's Franciscan Federation Conference took place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the home of 446 bridges, we were told. It's a forested, hilly city where the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers join together to form the mighty Ohio. This was the 57th year of the Franciscan Federation Conference. It was formed in 1965 by women religious Franciscan congregations of women religious. Though we in our community began studying Franciscan sources soon after Vatican II, had we even heard yet in 1965 about Big Red Omnibus, that first book of Franciscan resources. And yet that was the year that the Federation began. It was a place and an opportunity to explore the Franciscan charism for women religious leaders and members, as well as to share other issues that were critical in a time of great national change and change in the church also after Vatican II. It was a forward-looking move on the part of women religious congregations, of Franciscan women. Forward moving truly describes the Franciscan Federation. Periodically, it assesses where it is, it plans where to go, and then how best to get there. Sister Michelle Balick will share a little bit of the journey to Pittsburgh. Hearts on fire, journeying together on the way. Hearts on fire, journeying together on the way. Well, you'll be pleased to know I'm not going back 57 years, the journey to Pittsburgh. Just a few years back, in late 2019 and early 20, it was pre-pandemic, and the Charism Commission of the Federation devised and launched a survey. And this survey was to take the pulse of the Federation and gain a more concrete feedback from the membership. And this survey was unique in that it included associates. And from that survey, there were a lot of things that emerged. And it was very clear from those survey results that they wanted the Federation to be more inclusive
and to really transform itself to be relevant to today. It was also at this time that the Commission for Charism Services of the Federation convened two groups. One, the executive leaders of Franciscan organizations, commonly referred to as ELFO, great name, right? And a group that we call the Emergence, for emerging voices, young voices and people working with young adults. And those conversations were among those groups and kind of between those groups. And you will hear a little bit more about these two groups shortly. The survey results were shared with the membership via Zoom to gain their feedback again. The conference in 2020 was canceled because of the pandemic, but the Federation used that time to really process that survey, to process it with the membership, to have all of these conversations. So even though there wasn't a conference that year, there was a lot happening. The conference in 2021, we decided we needed to hold one, but it was held virtually. The theme was Called to This Hour, really centering in on the urgency of looking at all of these things and how do we respond. The keynoters were Dr. Brian McLaren and Carrie Robinson. And from these two presentations, there were a couple of very strong messages that came forward that really resonated and captivated the membership. And one was on the Franciscan Renaissance, a rebirthing of Franciscan values today and the need for that. And the other was what the keynoters referred to as a preferential option for the young. So you can imagine there was all kinds of excitement and buzz around that. A resolution was passed at that conference to allow the National Board to begin a transformational process. In other words, they had the freedom to suspend some of the bylaws and to experiment. Part of that first experimentation was to bring onto the National Board two voices that had never been on the board before. And that was a representative from the executive leaders of Franciscan organizations and a member of the Emergent or Emerging Voices group. They also the National Board formed a transformation task force. And that was led, or still is led, chaired by Sister Margaret Carney. And their purpose was to look at all of the structures as it had been, their purpose and their function, look at what's working and what's not, and then in the process of doing that, they consulted with the commissions, with the committees, with the board, with the membership, and they formed draft proposals, and then they went back to all of those groups and consulted again. You know, here's a proposal, what do you think? How can we tweak this? Does this make sense? They tweaked those proposals and brought them to this year's conference. And as Rita said, Hearts on Fire, Journeying Together was the theme. And all this time, the National Board has been working with the survey results, implementing things that we could, and the members were seeing this movement forward. So there was this momentum building of excitement and engagement. Things are happening, and people wanted to be present at this conference. So this energy has been building over these 2 years, and that is the backdrop for what happened at this year's conference. And so because I was unable to attend the conference. We're going to hear from people who were actually there. And the first one up, I'll turn it over to Janet to talk a bit more about the Emergence and the leaders from Franciscan organizations.
Thank you, Shel. Sounds a little bit like citadinality, doesn't it? All this consulting and conversations. The Emergence group, I happen to be one of the people from our community who was part of that, and as Shel said, this was made up of 30 people, some younger, and some of us who work with younger members, because we were of different ages. And notice the diversity there. We were from various backgrounds, from different Franciscan associations, Third Order Vowed members, associates, Poor Clares, Lutheran Franciscans, that was a newbie to me. I didn't know there were Lutheran Franciscans, and secular Franciscans. So it was a very diverse group. We also had there were 6 sessions that we were involved in, and we met from September 2020 to May 2021, and then we had another 8 sessions from September 2021 to May 2022. So a lot of sharing happened at those. And in the first session, the first 8 weeks, we looked at what Franciscan way of life might look like in the future if it was not grounded in institutions the way it has been. So these are like new forms. Brian McLaren led us in this reflection time with a focus of looking at this Franciscan Renaissance, which Shel talked about. And he said, because the dominant forms of Christianity are stuck, and people aren't coming to churches a lot anymore. So we have to look at new ways to keep those values alive. And he really emphasized that Franciscan values speak to the needs of the world today. He said if there was ever a need for Francis and Clare, it's today. New forms of living this charism are needed. So we came up with questions like, how do we support intentional living groups of lay people, religious, married, people of diverse faiths? So those might be some of the new models that we'll see emerging. And how do we resource these people? We continued these conversations in 2021, 2022 with the different groups called ELFO. I mean, that's the executive directors. But there are actually 8 different Franciscan organizations in existence that are working with trying to spread the Franciscan values. So when we look at this, we see that we have the Commission on Franciscan Intellectual Spiritual Tradition, the Association of Franciscan Colleges and Universities, AFCU, and I used to go to those meetings when I was at Briar Cliff, the Franciscan Action Network, and I think many of you may get their newsletter or action statements. FAN is the name of it. And then we also have Franciscans International, as you can see up there, Franciscan Media, the Franciscan Mission Service, which I believe Shel is trying to work with and collaborate with now, the Franciscan Pilgrimage Program, some of us have been on that pilgrimage program, and the Secular Franciscan Order. So there are a lot of different entities here that we're talking about. These conversations, in many ways, were trying to help us to see what are the needs of the future. And it really reminded me of the conversations we've been having, like on change and spirituality. Where do we go in the future? What's needed? And we know change is part of it, and the Federation's going through that as well. So we need to find ways that all of us can kind of move out of our silos instead of each trying to do their own thing. And I see that that's happening with religious communities too. LCWR, the Franciscan Federation, and all of these organizations are having to look at that as well. At the Federation, we continued to this kind of consultative conversational style. And for me, some of the positive signs that I saw, that I was excited about, was the actual inclusion and working together of all the organizations, trying to find ways to encourage one another. One example was, I remember at our roundtables hearing about how the Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation Commission is now working with FAN. You know, how can we work together rather than duplicate resources? Another one was a newly designed web page. And this is very exciting to see. It's now operative, and it's offering countless resources for us to educate ourselves and to deepen our understanding of the Franciscan charism. And it's free. I really encourage you to go and check it out. I was doing some exploring of it one day, and there are like YouTube talks from the Franciscan School of Theology, which is where Sarah Colas graduated from. There's Brewing Faith podcast, Haversack, which is a magazine we have in the library, I believe. All the back issues are on it. The Franciscan Intellectual Resources with scholars like Bill Short, Zachary Hayes, Eliadelio. They're all there for us. And also, I was exploring one day, and I found a talk by the retreat director that some of us had last month at Shalom. His name was Brent Anderson. And he actually had a talk on respectful dialogue, which was what our whole retreat was on. So there's some real gems there. I really would invite you to go and explore. The whole tone of the Federation is, is to get the information out. Get it out to the lay people, educate them. And this is a wonderful way to do it. And it, like I said, it's all free. Just download it. So if you have some spare time, go to the website. Another part that I was really excited about, because I have a great commitment to young adults these days, is this preferential option for the young. We heard from a panel of young adults who shared that young adults are seeking the relational aspect of the Franciscan charism. They're really attracted to that. So we have a gem that's somewhat hidden that's needed by our young people today. A lot of the young people today are victims of real mental and emotional anguish and pain from seeing failed commitments in their families and relationships. And they seek to have intergenerational mentors to journey with and teach them about living a loving, inclusive relationship. We are those mentors. They're attracted by seeing how we have learned to live together and how we've negotiated life steps and life's challenges. So you have an important role. Whatever you can do to mentor young adults in any way today is a great ministry. It was energizing to experience the passion these young adults had for Franciscan values. I was really thrilled to see that. They're so open to have us walk with them and help them negotiate the future. So I invite you to go and do it with hearts on fire.
Hearts on fire, journeying together on the way. Hearts on fire, journeying together on the way. As you can see, the Federation Conference continued the work that had already been done the previous couple of years. The way the conference agenda was planned and who was there, who attended, reflected the promise of newness. The planned events at the Federation Conference continued the down-to-earth work that is needed to continue, that is always a part of renewal and new life. The very first morning got people involved in conversations at the tables on any of about a dozen different topics. You could choose your own. The topics were assigned to tables, and you just chose where you wanted to go. These were called the Piazza Conversations. Anybody who's been in Italy, you know, you gather in the piazza and you chat. So these were informal conversations where intergenerationally, people from across the country and from all these different national Franciscan organizations shared initiatives, information, ideas, began to establish relationships, began to make informal connections with other persons or groups that they might want to continue working with, and building linkages both within and beyond the Federation. These Piazza Conversations were new for the Federation. Another new endeavor this year was the invitation and the intentional inclusion of lay associates. Nancy Knipper, of course, took advantage of as much time as possible with the other associate directors.
Thanks, Rita. This was my first time at the Federation, and I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to attend. First of all, I was able to meet people in person that previously in my 2.5 years here, I had only met on Zoom. Some were shorter in person than they look like on Zoom. The overarching goal for the Federation as concerning the associates is how can the Franciscan Federation support associate directors and therefore support all associates. So just a bit of a background information. In early fall of 2021, Sister Margaret Carney and Sister Karina Thomas wanted to create a subcommittee from the Commission of Charism Services. This subcommittee would look at ways that the Federation could potentially support associate directors. This subcommittee was created by associate directors, and they decided the best way to do this was through a survey. Now, this survey is different than the survey that Shell has already talked about. This survey was specifically for associate directors of the congregations in the Federation. So, for example, in January of 2022, I received a call from one of the members of the subcommittee, and I was invited to take the survey. So in total, 25 associate directors completed the survey questions. And a lot of our time then at the Federation was looking at the survey and what we had learned. So today I'd like to share some of that survey with you. These are the communities whose associate directors responded to the survey. There were 25 total. I believe all of them are congregations of women. There is one, the Brothers of the Poor of St. Francis. So mostly women congregations. I like numbers, so I get to pass on these next two slides to you. It wasn't in the January survey that this question was asked, but a phone call came later. How many sisters do you have and how many associates? So you might be looking at our line, Sisters of St. Francis. At the time, we had 165 vowed religious sisters when I answered that. I know it's not that right now, but then in total, you can see that the number of religious is a little lower than the number of associates, but yet not a great difference. They actually thought there would be a greater difference between those numbers. So that's just some information and some facts. One question that I thought was appropriate to share with you, the question was, how would you characterize what a good associate would be? And we could check one or all of the above. For example, that person would be a donor, a volunteer, active in parish life, embraces the charism, a friend of a sister or sisters or other. And you can see here that 24 of the 25 directors responding said that embracing the charism really constitutes a good associate. That would not be the word I would use, but that was the word that was in the survey. But I fully support that living the charism really is the vocation of an associate. We live the charism in our daily life in whatever way we are called to. And that's different for associates as it is different for vowed religious sisters as well. Another question was, are your associates Roman Catholic only or Roman Catholic and other? And you can see here that 72% of responding directors said that our associates are Roman Catholic and others. And we, of course, fall into that as well. And another question, would having associate formation materials in Spanish be helpful to you? We have 24 associates who live in Central America, and so, of course, I answered, yes, that would be helpful for us to have. So conclusion from these questions are simply, almost all associates are expected to embrace the charism. Almost 3/4 of our associate committees are ecumenical, and our associates are as well. And 37% of our associate communities have individuals who speak Spanish. And again, that's ours as well. That was some of the survey. Other survey questions were, what is your model of association? What is the support you receive from sisters? Are associates independent from sisters? And that includes financial independence. What is your original formation process? What is your ongoing formation process? Are directors willing to share that process? So you can imagine all of these responses were on every end of the continuum. And I do have a 33-page report. If anyone is interested in reading that, it's very interesting. So I do have that, but they only gave me 5 minutes here tonight, so I won't go through all that. So getting back to the original question, how can the Federation support the directors? Some possible ways that surfaced were providing materials for initial formation and ongoing formation, meet with each other for what I would call a peer support, and that would probably be on Zoom to share ideas and to support one another. And one other thing that really intrigues me is that the Federation could possibly conduct research on ways to sustain associates when religious communities are getting smaller. I'm very interested in this one. It seems as if all congregations in the United States are at a time in history where this is a fact and a pivotal question really for all of us. So I'm most intrigued by that as we go forward. So that is all I have, and again, thank you for this opportunity to attend the Federation.
Hearts on fire, journeying together on the way. Hearts on fire, journeying together on the way. Besides those already mentioned, there were many other fine presentations that were given at the Federation which we could share with you. But the one we were really looking forward to was the keynote presentation by Sister Eliadelio. And so Shell Waters is going to share some of her dynamic ideas with the Federation.
If you've ever read anything that Sister Eliadelio has written, you will know that she is a highly intelligent woman. And when I read her books, I have to reread the sentence once, twice, three. I read it 5 times sometimes just to get a little glimmer of what she's saying. So I was quite surprised to be sitting at the table with her at Franciscan Federation. And she was so real and easy to be with. And so that really helped me too. When it came time for her presentation, It was absolutely a wonderful experience. I was right there with her, feeling completely inspired and challenged, all at the same time. And as she flowed through her lecture, one idea built upon the other, which built upon the next. She taught us using, of course, her enormous vocabulary, and it was delightful. The name of her presentation was Chaotically Free, the Creative Spirit of Franciscan Life. In her presentation, Ilia talked about evolution, the evolution of the world and the cosmos, of science and religion, the evolution of nature and our own consciousness, and God's entanglement in it all. Through her whole presentation, it was very hope-filled. She talked about the creative energy of God always at work in creation, and how evolution is in the process of moving toward a cosmic wholeness. Then she'd throw in these one-liners that you could reflect on all day or week. If we want a different world, we must become a different people. She talked about Francis as a new human. Francis realized that the source of his own life was the very source of all created things and all that exists. As we know, he found God in creatures and identified with them as brother and sister. But his spirituality at that time overturned the hierarchical ascent of spirituality and replaced it with a spirituality between humanity and nature. For Francis, there were no things, only relationship. And from Francis, we see the value of relationship with all. Another one of her great one-liners. Our minds create the world, not the other way around. Ilia spoke of the human person being vitally related to the formation of the universe, and that contemplation is the process whereby human energy expands and consciousness is maximized. She spoke of the contemplative as human energetic. Contemplation and action are structurally related components of the rise of human energy. The contemplative one is one in whom the sap of the world, the energy of matter, flows, one who embodies a zest for life. And so she went on to talk about how we need to be living in a new way, to allow life to be centered in us, that God is both here with us and ahead of us. She talked about we are being saved by becoming one with the universe, that we must rethink this earth and cosmic community as our home. So she sent us with a challenge, that Franciscan life is not a matter of what we do or how we pray, but how we live in relation to the whole. It's all about relationship again. She talked about how Francis woke up every day to love anew, to life always beginning anew. And so she asked the question, how do we regulate a relational way of life where neither work nor prayer is its object? She gave us the 4 L's. It's not the answer to the question, but it might be a guide. Live, love, laugh, and let go. Live as if being born over and over again. Love as if discovering one another for the very first time. Laugh, as if the future depends upon it. Let go, and trust the chaotic movements of life, celebrating new beginnings. To live in the flow is to live in God. Ilia said that we are not waiting for Christ to come. We are the Christ coming in this world through us. We need to participate, not just wait. She concluded her presentation with a story from the Desert Fathers. And this is the story. Abba Lot went to see Abba Joseph and said, Abba, as much as I am able, I practice a small rule, a little fasting, some prayer and meditation, and remain quiet. And as much as possible, I keep my thoughts clean. What else should I do? The older Abba stood, stretched out his hands toward the heavens, and so did Ilia, and the old man said, why not be turned into fire? Now, the only thing that could have been better in her ending is if Ilia, when she threw her arms up in the air, turned into fire herself. Thank you. Hearts on fire, journeying together on the way. Hearts on fire, journeying together on the way.
Well, that was a whirlwind tour of the conference this year. Thank you for coming. And we'd like to invite you to consider coming to next year's conference, which will be in St. Louis. And for those of you interested in Ilia's presentation, I've heard that they're working on editing the film. They had just filmed everything in a day, so they have to kind of edit just hers. And I'm sure it is going to be available probably on the website, and I'm sure they will let us know when that's available. So again, thank you for coming, and hope to see a lot of you St. Louis next year. Thank you.